"Honey, I need you to come tonight," my mother said from the rehab center. I was standing in my kitchen with a plain cream envelope on the counter, the kind of envelope that looks harmless until it changes the whole shape of a family. 6 days earlier, that envelope had shown me where I stood. My brother Mark had been given almost everything that mattered on paper: the inheritance, the trust, the praise. And somehow, I was still the first number the rehab desk called when Mom fell again. That is why the thumbnail only needed 2 words: "call him." Because for the first time in my life, I was going to say them out loud. Not as revenge, not as a legal threat, not because I stopped loving my mother, because love had become the word my family used whenever they needed me to erase the record. My name is Laura. I am 52 years old enough to have a mortgage, a calendar full of work deadlines, and a daughter in college who still calls me when her car makes a strange sound. But in my mother's retirement village, I was not treated like a grown woman with a life. I was treated like the emergency plan. For years, if Patricia missed an appointment, I fixed it. If the pharmacy mix-up confused her, I made the calls. If she needed new shoes, a ride, a suitcase packed for a short stay, or someone to sit beside her, while a discharge nurse explained the next step, everyone looked past Mark and landed on me. Mark lived closer. That was the part strangers never understood. He could reach Mom's building in 25 minutes on a normal afternoon. I had to check flights, ask for time off, leave groceries in the refrigerator for my own family, and hope my manager would hear, "My mother had another accident," without hearing, "Laura is unreliable again." Still, every time the phone rang, I went. I told myself daughters do that. I told myself Mom remembered. Then the envelope came. It did not arrive with drama. No courtroom. No angry family meeting. No official looking close-up anyone needs to read on screen. Just a plain envelope Mom asked me to take from the top drawer of her small writing desk because she wanted me to understand the plan. I sat at her round kitchen table, the same table where I had sorted pill bottles, insurance mail, birthday cards, grocery receipts, and her little stack of church newsletters. Mom watched me open it with that careful softness she used when she had already made a decision and wanted me to absorb it without making things difficult. I will not pretend I understood every line. This story is not advice about Will's money medicine or care decisions. It is about what happens when a family gives one child the authority and another child the burden, then acts surprised when the burdened child finally reads the room. What I understood was simple enough. Mark was protected. Mark was trusted. Mark was the son Patricia talked about when people asked who was looking after things. And I was the daughter she called when looking after things required a suitcase, a credit card, a missed week of work, and a smile at the front desk. So when the rehab center called 6 days later, I did what I had never done before. I looked at the envelope. I looked at my phone. And before Laura, the dependable daughter, could answer, Laura, the exhausted woman, finally asked the question that had been waiting under every receipt, every canceled plan, and every late-night drive. If Mark had been given the place of honor in my mother's future, why was I still being asked to carry the emergency in her present? Before I could say, "call him," without shaking, I had to admit how long I had been trained to answer first. I did not become the default helper in one dramatic moment. That would have been easier to recognize. There was no family vote, no meeting at Patricia's retirement village, no sentence where anyone said, "Laura, from now on, you will be responsible whenever Mom needs something." It happened in smaller ways, which made it feel almost harmless at first. The first time Mom forgot where she put her new insurance card, I knew which kitchen drawer held her folders. The first time the front desk needed a family contact for a maintenance issue, I answered because Mark was probably driving. The first time she got nervous about an appointment, I stayed on the phone while she wrote the time down. None of those moments looked unfair by themselves. They looked like daughter things. They looked like love. And because I was good at them, nobody noticed they were turning into a job. Patricia had a way of making dependence sound like gratitude. She would sigh into the phone and say, "I knew you would understand." Or, "You always know what to do." Or the line that worked on me for years, "Your brother gets overwhelmed by details." That line did more damage than any argument. It gave Mark permission to be absent without looking cruel, and it gave me a compliment that felt too cold to hold. I was organized. I was patient. I was the calm one. So if Mom misplaced a bill, I called the office. If she got confused by a letter from the retirement village, I asked her to put it in a folder and wait until I could walk her through it. If she needed someone patient, my phone rang before anyone checked whether Mark was free. And Mark learned the rhythm faster than I did. He did not refuse in a way anyone could point to. He simply stayed vague. I can try later. Text me what she needs. You are better with her when she is upset. Every sentence sounded reasonable until it landed on the same person. Me. By the second year, the staff at the retirement village knew my voice. They would say, "Hi, Laura, sorry to bother you again," before they even explained what happened. I kept a small folder in my bag with Mom's basic contacts and front desk names. Nothing official, nothing anyone needs to zoom in and read. Just the ordinary paper trail of a daughter trying to make sure her mother was not lost in the shuffle. The strange part is that I was proud of it. I thought being needed meant being valued. When Mom introduced me to neighbors, she would say, "This is Laura, she handles things." Then she would laugh softly like it was a family joke and not a warning. Mark got a different introduction. "This is my son Mark. He is so busy, but he checks on me." One child was praised for showing up occasionally. The other was praised for never being allowed to stop. That was the pattern I carried into every phone call, every folder, every quiet apology from a front desk employee who knew they were reaching me again. I just did not have a name for it yet. The habit did not feel expensive until I started lining up the receipts beside the days I could never get back. I started with the receipts because receipts do not care how guilty you feel. They were not dramatic. No stamped warning. No official document anyone needs to read. Just folded paper from airport kiosks, rental car counters, parking lots, pharmacies, and little cafes near Patricia's retirement village, where I bought a sandwich after realizing I had forgotten to eat. For years, I had treated those receipts like clutter. I would come home from helping Mom empty my purse onto the kitchen counter and push the papers into a drawer beside spare keys. Then I would tell myself I was lucky I could help. Lucky I had enough flexibility. Lucky my husband did not make me feel worse when dinner became takeout again. But after the rehab call and the will envelope, I opened that drawer differently. I did not open it like a daughter cleaning up after a hard week. I opened it like a woman finally asking what the pattern had cost. The first stack was travel. Flights booked with very little notice because Mom had slipped in her apartment because the retirement village wanted a family member present, or because Patricia called at 7 in the morning and said, "I just feel better when you are here." Sometimes the flight was not the expensive part. It was the car. It was the airport parking. It was the extra night at a plain hotel because a plan changed after I had already packed. It was the grocery run after I landed because Mom said she had food. Then I opened her refrigerator and found almost nothing she trusted enough to eat. None of that looked like sacrifice in the moment. It looked like solving the next problem. Then I pulled out my PTO calendar. That was worse. Money leaves a trail you can add up. Time leaves blank spaces where your life was supposed to be. There were half days marked for calls with the front desk. Full days used for appointments Mark said he could not make. Long weekends that were not vacations, just recovery trips with a suitcase and a phone charger I kept by Mom's recliner. I saw the Friday I missed my daughter's campus visit. I saw the Monday I joined a work meeting from a rental car outside Mom's building. I saw the week saved for our anniversary trip broken into separate Mom emergencies until there was nothing left to reschedule. And the strange thing was no one had stolen those days from me in a single cruel gesture. I had handed them over one at a time. That was what made the proof so hard to look at. Every receipt had a reason. Every PTO block had a story. Every story had the same ending Laura handled it. When I tried to mention the cost, Patricia would soften her voice and say, "I know, honey, but you are so good at this." And because I wanted that to mean she saw me, I accepted it as payment. Mark never asked what those trips took from my household. He never asked how much notice I gave at work, what I missed with my own daughter, or whether my savings account was quietly absorbing Mom's emergencies while his weekends stayed intact. He did not have to ask. The family arrangement protected him from knowing. That was the first clear answer the receipts gave me. I had not only been helping Patricia, I had been protecting Mark from the full weight of being the son everyone praised. While my calendar showed the cost of showing up, Mark's life showed the comfort of being praised for almost showing up. Mark was not the kind of son people complained about at first. That was part of the problem. If he had been openly cold, if he had ignored Patricia completely, if he had snapped at her in front of the family, someone might have named the imbalance sooner. But Mark had a more comfortable version of devotion. He called just enough. He visited just enough. He remembered birthdays sent flowers on Mother's Day and knew how to stand beside Patricia in a family photo with one hand on the back of her chair, looking like the son every mother hopes she raised. From the outside, it worked. Patricia's neighbors saw him on the pleasant afternoons, not the hard mornings. They saw him carry in a bakery box, not answer the voicemail from the front desk when Mom was frightened and confused. They saw him kiss her cheek in the lobby, not decide whether he could leave work early when an appointment changed. And Mom loved that version of him. She protected it like it was fragile. When Mark came by for 40 minutes, Patricia would tell me 3 times, "Your brother stopped in." Mark looked so tired, but he still made time. "He worries about me, you know." I used to nod because arguing with gratitude felt petty. What was I supposed to say? That his 40 minutes did not cover the 3 calls I had made that morning. That his bakery box did not replace the suitcase I had never fully unpacked. That worry is easy when someone else turns it into action. So I stayed quiet. And every time I stayed quiet, the family story became stronger. Mark was busy but loving. Laura was capable and available. Those 2 sentences explained everything away. If Patricia needed a ride and Mark had plans, he was overwhelmed. If I had plans and Patricia needed a ride, I was dependable. If Mark forgot to call back, he had a lot on his plate. If I missed one call because I was in a meeting, Mom's voice changed into that wounded little silence that made me apologize before I had even done anything wrong. The proof was not in one dramatic betrayal. It was in the small, uneven record. A family group chat where Mark sent a heart emoji after I posted an update from Mom's appointment. A holiday dinner where Patricia told everyone Mark had been checking on her constantly, while I knew that meant 2 short calls and 1 question texted to me afterward. A Sunday afternoon when he dropped by because he was already nearby, then left before the retirement village nurse finished explaining what Patricia needed next. None of those moments would sound terrible by themselves. That was how the pattern survived. Mark did enough to be praised, but not enough to be relied on. He let everyone see affection, then stepped back before affection became responsibility. And Patricia made that distance look noble. She would say, "I don't want to burden him." But she never said the same thing about me. With me, burden had become invisible because I carried it well. For years, I told myself Mark simply did not understand the details. Maybe if I explained the medication schedule, the appointment folder, the retirement village contacts, he would finally see what it took. But the receipts had already answered that. He did not need every detail to know I was losing time. He did not need a spreadsheet to know I was flying and taking calls using PTO and cleaning up the pieces he was too busy to touch. He only needed the arrangement to keep working. And it did. It worked because Patricia praised his smallest effort like proof of character. It worked because I translated every emergency into a plan. It worked because no one asked why the son who lived closer was treated like a guest, while the daughter who lived farther away was treated like infrastructure. That was the word I did not want to use. Infrastructure. The road everyone drives on without thanking it. The light switch no one notices until it stops working. The thing assumed to be there because it has always been there. Once I saw Mark's version of being a good son clearly, I could not unsee it. The praise had distance built into it. The affection had an exit. The convenience had a witness. And once I saw that pattern clearly, the accidents before the final rehab call stopped looking random. Once I saw Mark's version of being a good son, clearly the accidents before the final rehab call stopped looking random. That was the part I had missed for years. It was never one giant emergency. It was a rhythm. A call from the front desk. A call from the nurse. A call from the rehab desk. Always something small enough to sound temporary. Always something just serious enough that someone had to come. Patricia would not describe it the same way twice. One day it was a slip in the hallway. Another day it was a dizzy spell after breakfast. Another day it was a checkup that turned into, "We need a family member here." Nothing graphic, nothing cinematic, nothing that would make a stranger gasp. Just enough to break the day in half. I would get the call, check the time, and start rearranging my life before I even knew how bad it was. If I was already at work, I would step into the hallway with my purse still on my shoulder and call my manager from the quiet end of the corridor. If I was in the car, I would turn around. If I was home, I would start looking for the charger, the keys, the folder, the route, the same few things I always needed when Patricia had another emergency. And every time I was the person who answered first. That was the part that turned the accidents into a pattern. Not just that they kept happening, it was that they always landed on me. Mark could be reached but not relied on. He would text after the fact. "How is Mom? Let me know if you need anything. I am slammed today, but I hope she is okay." Those messages sounded caring until you noticed the timing. They arrived after I had already driven across town, after I had already waited in a lobby, after I'd already promised my own family that I would be home for dinner and then failed again. Patricia never called it a burden. She called it being there. She called it family. She called it the kind of thing a daughter would understand. And because the emergencies were usually quiet and ordinary, I kept telling myself the same thing. Maybe this was just what aging looked like. Maybe this was just what happens when someone lives in a retirement village and needs more help than she used to. Maybe I was making too much of it because I was tired. But the record in my life did not agree. There was the afternoon I left a work meeting because the front desk said Patricia had gone down hard enough to need a ride and a check. There was the Saturday I had set aside for my daughter, then spent in a waiting room because Patricia had another scare and did not want to sit alone. There was the day I had already promised myself I would stay home, only to hear that the facility wanted me there again because it would be better if a daughter came. Better for who? That was the question I kept swallowing. Better for Patricia because I would absorb the disruption without making her feel guilty. Better for Mark because the family story stayed clean if his help remained occasional and praised. Better for everyone else because I had become the person who could make an emergency look manageable. The accidents were not random, they were the mechanism. Each one pulled me back into the same role. Each one reminded me that the family had built a system where my life could be paused without discussion. Each one made the next call feel a little more inevitable than the one before. By the time the final rehab call came, I was already carrying the memory of all the earlier ones. The same desk, the same nervous voice, the same expectation that Laura would make it simple. So when I looked back at the plain envelope on the counter, I finally understood why it had felt heavier than paper. It was not just a family document waiting for me. It was the reason the pattern had been allowed to keep going. I did not open the envelope in some dramatic rush. I brought it home, set it on the table, and stared at it long enough to feel foolish for how much a plain piece of paper could weigh on a person. It was a simple envelope. No seal, no fancy folder, no color-coded tabs, just Patricia's careful handwriting on the front, and that same calm, tidy look she used whenever she wanted something to feel smaller than it was. That was the first clue that the real shock would not be in the paper itself. It would be in the decision behind it. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it like I was trying not to wake somebody. Inside was not a stack of secrets. It was worse than that. It was ordinary. A short estate note, a basic copy of her wishes, a page that did not need to shout because it knew I would understand it anyway. I did not need to read every line to see the shape of it. Mark's name was in the place that mattered. Mine was not. That was the moment the whole family story tipped. Because for years I had been the one who answered the calls no one else wanted. I had booked the flights. I had used the PTO. I had sat in lobbies, waited for updates, and called work from parking lots because Mom needed a daughter who could move fast. And now the paper was telling me that the child who carried the burden was not the child Patricia had chosen to trust with the future. I looked back down at the envelope as if it might explain itself if I stared hard enough. It did not. What it did was make one thing impossible to ignore. The rehab desk still had my number first. My calendar still held the missed days. My suitcase still knew the route to Patricia's building. But on paper, the family had made a different decision about who counted. That contradiction hit harder than anger. Anger would have been cleaner. Anger would have meant I could point to one cruel moment and say, there it is. This was not clean. This was a long habit laid down so slowly that nobody had to call it unfair out loud. Patricia had not just picked Mark for the future. She had also trained the present to keep leaning on me. That way, when the envelope finally reached my hands, the shock landed on top of years of unpaid care and all the little emergencies that had already taught me not to expect much back. I kept thinking about the same ugly little math problem. If Mark was the one Patricia wanted to favor on paper, why was I still the one her world called first when the wheels came off? Why did the daughter who handled the crises get the smaller place in the plan? Why did every trip, every missed workday, every late-night call feel like proof of love when the paper sitting on my table said love had been sorted out very differently? I folded the page back down and put it inside the envelope again, not because it got easier, but because I needed both hands free to hold on to what I had just learned. The envelope had not given me a full argument. It had given me the first honest shape of the problem. I was the emergency contact for a life Patricia was living in the present. Mark was the chosen name in the future she had written down. And once I saw that split clearly, I could not stop seeing what it meant. Somewhere inside that same neat handwriting, Patricia had decided the son who stayed light on his feet deserved the reward, while the daughter who kept the whole thing from falling apart was still expected to carry the next crisis. I sat there with the envelope in my lap and realized I was not looking at a mistake. I was looking at a family order I had helped enforce by being too useful to question. That was the part I did not want to admit yet. Not that I had been left out, not just that Mark had been favored. It was that Patricia seemed to think the choice made perfect sense. And before I could even decide whether to be hurt or furious, I needed to know how she had talked herself into it. That was the question I could not answer until I heard her explain it. When I asked Patricia why Mark's name sat where mine should have been, she did not answer like someone trying to hurt me. That would have been easier. She answered like someone explaining herself to herself. Mark has always needed a little more support, she said. She said it quietly as if the words were obvious. As if they belonged in the same category as weather taxes or the fact that I always knew where the scissors were. I sat across from her with the envelope in my lap and waited for the sentence that would make the whole thing make sense. It never came. Instead, Patricia kept going. Your brother works hard. He has a lot on him. He has a different life than you. Different life. That was how she made it sound fair, not better. Not more loved. Just different enough that the numbers did not have to be compared. I asked her if that meant the years I spent answering calls and rearranging travel and sitting in waiting rooms did not count. She frowned not because she did not understand the question, but because she heard it as accusation. Laura, you are capable, she said. That word used to feel like praise. Now it felt like a bill. Capable meant I could be the one to absorb inconvenience without falling apart. Capable meant I could carry the emergency and still be expected to smile when Patricia thanked me for it later. Capable meant my need to be seen could be set aside because I was the one who kept moving. I told her Mark had always been praised for checking in while I had been made responsible for everything that actually happened. Patricia shook her head in that small, tired way parents do when they think the child has missed the point. Mark worries in his own way, she said. There it was. The family excuse dressed up as tenderness. Worry for Mark was a feeling. Worry for me was a calendar, a flight, a receipt, a missed day, a phone call answered before work could start. I asked her if she remembered the nights I stayed up after her falls, the mornings I called the retirement desk, before sunrise, the weekends I gave up because no one else wanted to be the person in the room when things got hard. She did remember. I could tell by the pause. But memory was not the same as admission. You always handle things so well, she said. That sentence should have comforted me. Instead, it exposed the entire system. If I handled things well, then the family could keep pretending the burden was light. If I made the crisis look manageable, nobody had to ask who it was really costing. Patricia did not need to say Mark was the favorite. She only needed to keep treating me like the one who would understand. That way she could call it practical instead of partial. That way she could call it kindness instead of convenience. I looked at her and finally understood something that had been hiding inside every quiet rescue. She was not claiming Mark was more worthy. She was claiming the arrangement was easier. And if the arrangement was easier for everyone except me, then the family had been building its peace on my willingness to disappear inside it. Patricia reached for the envelope, then stopped halfway through the motion. For the first time she looked uncertain. Not guilty. Uncertain. As if my silence had always made this easier than it deserved to be. I could feel the old reflex rising in me right then. Explain it away. Make her comfortable. Tell her I understood. But I had already spent enough years translating unfairness into something polite. So I let the room stay uncomfortable. That was when Patricia finally said the line that made the split impossible to ignore. I thought you would always be there. That was not an apology. It was the whole plan. Patricia's sentence stayed in the air longer than it should have. I thought you would always be there. I knew what she meant. She meant she had depended on me so long that she had stopped noticing the cost. She meant my reliability had become part of the house, part of the family furniture, part of the system that kept the whole thing from falling apart. She meant the arrangement had lasted long enough to feel natural. That was the cruelest part. Nobody had to force me into the role with one dramatic command. They just kept rewarding the version of me that made life easier, the version that booked the flights, the version that answered early, the version that arrived with the spare charger, the backup plan, and the smile that kept Patricia from feeling guilty. Love got used as the wrapper around all of it. That is what made the truth sting, because I did not feel tricked in one moment. I felt translated. Every time I said yes, the family heard devotion. Every time I rearranged my life, they heard support. Every time I absorbed another emergency, they heard proof that Laura was strong enough to manage. Strong enough. Capable. Good with details. Better under pressure. Those compliments had always felt warm on the outside. Now I could see how they worked. They turned my labor into personality. If it looked like a trait, nobody had to call it work. If it looked like love, nobody had to pay attention to who kept paying the price. I looked at the envelope, then at Patricia, and I understood something I should have understood years ago. I had not just been helping. I had been cushioning the whole family from the consequences of their own choices. Patricia could favor Mark because I made the gap survivable. Mark could stay comfortable because I made the crises look contained. The retirement village could keep calling me first because I answered like a person who had built her life around being useful. And once useful becomes dependable, people stop asking whether it is fair. That realization was not loud. It was more like a door closing softly in my head. One room went away and another opened. In the first room, I was still trying to earn my place by being the best version of a daughter. In the second room, I could finally see that the place had already been assigned. Not by love, by convenience. Patricia sat quietly while I worked through that in my face. I do not think she liked what she saw. But I also do not think she had ever expected to see it. That was the point of the whole arrangement. As long as Laura kept showing up, nobody had to name the imbalance. As long as I made it work, the family could keep calling it care. I felt something inside me go still. Not cold. Still. That is different. Cold is what people call you when they want you to stop noticing. Still is what happens when you finally see enough to stop performing the old role. So I put the envelope back on the table and looked at Patricia without offering the usual rescue. No explanation. No softening. No promise that I would sort it out later. For once I let the words land exactly where they were meant to land. Love had been used to make the labor invisible. And now that I could see it, I could not pretend the family had simply been unlucky. They had been comfortable. That comfort had a name. Mine. The folder on Patricia's side table was plain enough to miss. That was probably the point. It held the kind of paper families do not think about until they have to. Emergency contact information, medical forms, the name of the person the staff would call if something went wrong. I had seen it before in fragments. I had answered calls from the retirement village. I had signed visitors lists. I had spoken to reception. I had been the one on the line when things got confusing. But when I looked at the folder with fresh eyes, I noticed the split I had somehow managed not to name. Mark's name was the one Patricia had placed where decisions lived. Mine was the one everyone reached when a decision had already become a problem. That is a hard thing to notice because it does not announce itself as cruelty. It announces itself as paperwork, as a routine, as just in case. And once the role is hidden inside a folder, everybody gets to pretend the arrangement is normal. Mark had the authority that looked responsible from a distance. Laura had the burden that showed up at the bedside. Mark could be the person discussed in a calm voice when people wanted to sound organized. I was the person who got the call when Patricia had already fallen, already panicked, already needed somebody to make the next 20 minutes easier. That difference should have mattered more than it did. Instead, the family had built a system where the visible person and the useful person were not the same. Mark was the one Patricia could point to if someone asked who handled things. I was the one the staff trusted because I actually answered. Those roles are not equal. They never were. I realized that the medical folder did not just show who had been chosen. It showed how carefully the family had divided responsibility so that Mark could stay cleaner than the mess. That way, when a real problem came, the phone still had to ring my number first. The burden stayed with the person who had already proven she would not leave people stranded. The authorities sat with the person who could remain impressive by staying slightly out of reach. I stood there holding the folder and felt the whole thing click into place. Patricia had not only favored Mark, she had also built a structure that made his distance look sensible. If he was the one on the form, then his absence could always be explained away. If I was the one on the call list, then my presence could always be taken for granted. That was the real split. Not who cared. Who was expected to carry. Once I saw that the next emergency stopped looking like a personal failure. It looked like a machine. And I had been the part that kept it running. The call came just before noon, not at a dramatic hour, not in the middle of the night. Just late enough in the morning to interrupt the kind of day that can still be salvaged if nobody asks too much of you. The rehab desk had my number again. Of course it did. That is what happens when people get used to your voice answering on the first ring. Is this Laura? Yes. Your mother needs someone to come in today. That sentence had been 1,000 different sentences over the years, and somehow always the same one. The details changed. The urgency changed. The paperwork changed. The setting changed. But the demand stayed familiar. Show up. Solve it. Make it easier. I looked at the phone and thought about the folder from Patricia's side table, about Mark's name on the paper, and about the fact that none of those things had prepared anyone at the rehab desk to call him first. They called me because I was the person who would probably come. Not because I had been chosen. Because I had been trained. I did not answer right away. That pause would have meant nothing to anyone else. For me, it felt like stepping out of a moving line and realizing nobody had even noticed I was carrying the wrong load. The woman on the phone repeated my mother's name and waited. I could hear the quiet bustle behind her, the clipped voices, the chair wheels, the ordinary machinery of other people's emergencies. And there it was again, that old reflex to absorb the whole thing before it could become anybody else's problem. I almost did it. I almost said I was on my way. I almost started checking flights and calling work and planning the least disruptive way to disappear again. But I was not the same person who had opened the envelope. I was not the same person who had watched Patricia explain the split like it was sensible. I was not the same person who could hear a call like that and mistake obligation for proof of love. So I said the words I had been rehearsing in my own head for months without knowing it. Call Mark. There was a short silence on the line. Not confusion. More like the system had reached a sentence it did not know how to process. I repeated it calm and slow enough to make it land. Please call Mark. Then I added one more thing because I wanted the boundary to be a direction, not a punishment. He is the one Patricia put in charge. The rehab desk did not argue with me. They could not. I was not refusing care. I was refusing to keep being the only person who got pulled into the room when the family arrangement failed. When I hung up, the house was still quiet. That was the strangest part. Nothing exploded. No one called me selfish. No one rushed in with a grand speech. The world simply kept going while my hands stopped moving toward the keys. For the first time, the emergency was still happening somewhere else, and it was not mine to swallow first. The first boundary did not look like a speech. It looked like a closed laptop. That surprised me. For years, every emergency had started the same way. I would hang up, open the laptop search flights, check my work calendar, text my husband, and begin shrinking my own life until Patricia's problem could fit inside it. This time I did none of that. I stood in the kitchen with the phone still warm in my hand and waited for the panic to tell me what to do. It came. Of course it came. Panic is familiar. It knows your old roots. It told me I was being cruel. It told me Patricia was scared. It told me people would misunderstand. It told me one flight would not ruin me, one more trip would not matter, one more day off would be easier than the guilt. But guilt had always been the first ticket in my hand. This time I let it stay unused. I walked to the table and looked at my laptop without opening it. That was the whole decision. No airport search. No rental car. No message to my manager saying I was sorry to do this again. No drawer opening for the travel folder. No suitcase on the bed. Just the quiet sound of my own house continuing around me. The refrigerator hummed. The clock moved. Someone's car passed outside. Ordinary things all still there because I had not abandoned them in the first 5 minutes of someone else's emergency. I had never realized how quickly I used to disappear. That was the part that made me sit down. Before anyone yelled. Before anyone accused. Before Mark even knew he had been called. My body had already expected me to leave. It had learned the sequence so well that stillness felt like disobedience. I put my phone face down on the table. Then I turned it over again because I was not trying to hide. That mattered. I was not ignoring Patricia. I was not pretending the call had not happened. I was making one clean decision. The person Patricia placed in charge needed to be called first. The son who received the trust needed to be asked to carry the emergency before the daughter who had already spent years being treated like the backup plan. That was not revenge. It was alignment. Responsibility needed to follow the authority everyone else had already accepted. When I did not book the flight, nothing in the room changed. But everything in me did. For the first time, I could feel the difference between helping and volunteering to disappear. Helping can be generous. Disappearing is a pattern. And I had disappeared so often that my family had mistaken my absence from my own life for proof that I loved them correctly. I stayed at the table. I answered one work email, then another. Not because work mattered more than Patricia. Because my life did not stop belonging to me just because the phone rang. That was when the first message came through from Mark. Not a call. A message. And before I even opened it, I knew the family was about to notice the machine had missed a part. When I did not move, the family had to find another way to make my stillness feel like a crime. The group chat started quietly. That is how family pressure usually begins. Not with shouting. With concern that has already chosen its target. Mark wrote first. Mom is upset. Rehab said you told them to call me. I looked at the sentence for a long moment because it was almost honest. Almost. He did not ask how Patricia was. He did not say he was on his way. He did not say he had called the rehab desk back. He led with the part that made me look wrong. Then my cousin Mary Ann responded with a question mark. Then Aunt Joyce wrote, Laura, this is not the time. That was the sentence family uses when they want your boundary to wait until it can be forgotten. Not the time. As if there had ever been a time. As if I should have brought this up during a quiet dinner between the salad and the coffee while everyone nodded politely and then went right back to calling me first. Mark sent another message. I am in meetings all afternoon. There it was again. The old family math. His meeting was a wall. My workday was a suggestion. His schedule had weight. Mine had always been adjustable. I did not answer right away. Instead, I watched the little bubbles appear and disappear on the screen. People were typing and deleting, choosing words, trying to sound fair while pushing me back into the same role. Someone wrote that Patricia was fragile. Someone wrote that Mark was doing his best. Someone wrote that I should not make this about money. That last one almost made me laugh. Not because anything was funny, because the entire family had made it about money when Patricia chose who would inherit and who would keep showing up. They just did not like that I had noticed. I kept my phone on the table and let the messages gather. That was harder than answering. Answering would have given me something to do. Stillness made me feel every old hook trying to pull me back. Be the reasonable one. Be the daughter. Be the person who understands. Be the one who saves everyone from having to say what they really mean. Before I tell you the exact sentence I finally sent back, I want to ask you something. If you have stayed with Laura this far, leave one word in the comments, fairness. Not because a comment changes anyone's family. Because I want to know who understands the difference between helping someone and being assigned the emergency every time everyone else wants to stay comfortable. Now listen carefully to what I wrote because it was the first time I refused to turn my life into the family's shock absorber. I read the messages one more time. Then I opened a blank reply. My hands were not steady, but my answer was, and after all those messages, I finally typed the sentence the family had spent years teaching me not to say. I typed the sentence slowly because I wanted every word to belong to me, not to panic, not to guilt, not to the family rhythm that had always made me soften the truth before anyone had to hear it. I wrote, please call Mark. Mom chose him to handle this and I am not booking a flight today. Then I stopped. I read it again. It looked almost too small for the number of years behind it. One sentence. No accusation. No speech. No list of receipts. No paragraph about the campus visit I missed or the anniversary trip that disappeared into appointment calls. Just the first clear connection between Patricia's decision and Patricia's emergency. I sent it before I could polish it into something easier for everyone else to swallow. The chat went quiet. That silence felt different from the silence in my kitchen. My kitchen silence had been mine. This silence belonged to the people who had expected me to explain myself until they found the old version of me hiding in the explanation. Mark did not respond for a full minute. Then he wrote, this is not about the will. I stared at that message and felt almost peaceful, because it was exactly about the will. Not the money alone, not the paper alone. The will had not caused the whole problem. It had exposed it. It showed who Patricia had chosen when things were calm, and the rehab call showed who everyone still expected when things got hard. Those two facts belonged in the same room. The family simply did not want them touching. I wrote back once. It is about responsibility matching the decisions everyone already accepted. Then I put the phone down. Patricia called me 5 minutes later. I let it ring twice before answering because I needed to remind myself that I could choose the moment instead of being swallowed by it. Her voice was small. "Laura, why are you doing this now?" That question would have broken me a month earlier. Now I could hear what it was asking. Why now when I need you? Why now when Mark is busy? Why now when everyone is watching? Why now when your silence would be easier for me? I answered carefully, because this is exactly when the arrangement becomes visible. She was quiet. I continued. You put Mark in the place of trust. You told me he needed more. You made him the person who benefits from your plan. Then the rehab desk called me like none of that happened. My voice did not rise. That mattered. I was not trying to punish her with volume. I was trying to say the thing plainly enough that no one could mistake the boundary for a mood. Call Mark, I said again. The words landed softer the second time. Not because they were weaker, because I was not asking permission anymore. Patricia made a sound that was almost a sigh and almost a plea. He may not be able to come. There it was. The truth hiding inside the whole family system. Everyone already knew Mark might not come. That was why they kept calling me. I closed my eyes and let that realization pass through me without turning it into another rescue. Then he needs to say that to you, I said. Not through me. When I hung up, I did not feel victorious. I felt the ache of a daughter who had finally stopped carrying messages between people who had benefited from not speaking directly. Once the sentence was out in the world, Mark could no longer stay praised and unreachable at the same time. Mark called me 11 minutes after I hung up with Patricia. I know because I watched the minutes pass on the microwave clock like they were part of the story. When his name appeared on my phone, I let it ring once. Then twice. Not to punish him. To remind myself I was allowed to answer as a person, not as a reflex. When I picked up, Mark skipped hello. What are you doing? His voice had that tight public tone people use when they are already imagining how the story will sound if anyone asks. I said, I told Mom to call you. She did. Good. The word sat between us. He did not like it. I cannot just drop everything today, he said. There it was. The sentence I had been saying with my life for years, finally spoken by the person the family had protected from having to live it. I did not argue. I did not remind him that I had dropped everything so many times that my own family knew the shape of my absence. I did not list the flights, the PTO, the missed weekends, the work calls from parking lots. I only said, then tell Mom that. He exhaled hard. You know how she gets? Yes. I did know. I knew how Patricia's voice softened when she wanted me to feel cruel. I knew how she made fear sound like a request and dependence sound like love. I knew how she could say, I just need you, and make me forget that needing someone is not the same as owning their time. But for the first time, I did not turn that knowledge into a service. Mark, I said, I am not carrying the conversation for you. He went quiet. That quiet was more honest than anything he had said. Because for years, I had not only carried Patricia's emergencies. I had carried Mark's explanations. I had softened his absence before Patricia could feel it. I had translated his busy into something kinder. I had made sure he could stay loved without being tested too hard. Now the test had reached him, and the first thing he wanted was for me to hold it again. This is a bad time, he said. It usually is, I answered. I did not say it sharply. That was what made it land. Emergencies do not arrive when calendars are empty. They arrive when work is waiting, when dinner is half planned, when a daughter promised herself she would finally stay home. That had never stopped anyone from calling me. Mark tried again. I can maybe go tomorrow. Maybe. Tomorrow. The two words that had protected him for years. I thought about Patricia sitting in that rehab room upset because the old system had not worked, and for a moment I felt the old guilt flare. Then I pictured the envelope. I pictured Mark's name in the place of trust. I pictured my phone ringing anyway. And the guilt did not disappear. It just stopped making the decision. Then tell Mom tomorrow, I said. And tell the rehab desk what you can actually do. He said my name like a warning. Laura. I waited. He had nothing after it. That was the shape of his help when it was finally placed in his hands. A name. A pause. A hope that I would step back into the old role before he had to finish the sentence. I did not. When the call ended, I understood why the family had worked so hard to keep Mark's love untested. It was easier to praise him when no one asked him to carry the weight. When Mark could not make it, the question stopped being who loved Patricia more and became who had been funded to solve the problem. After Mark said he could maybe go tomorrow, I sat with the part of the story nobody wanted to touch. The money. Not because money was the whole wound. It was not. If Patricia had left Mark more and also treated me honestly, I would have been hurt, but I might have understood the shape of it. What made it unbearable was the way the money and the labor pointed in opposite directions. Mark had been placed closer to the resources. I had been kept closer to the crisis. That was not balance. That was a system. I am not giving advice about wills or care plans or what any family should do with money. I am telling you what I saw in my own kitchen that day. There were resources in Patricia's plan. There was a son she had trusted on paper. There were facilities, staff transport options, care coordinators, and paid ways to solve problems that did not require a 52-year-old daughter to erase another week of her own life. For years I had acted like the only available care fund was my time, my PTO, my credit card, my travel days, my marriage adjusting around another sudden trip, my daughter's face when I said I had to leave again. But my time was not a family account everyone could draw from without asking. It was a life. That sentence sounds simple until you have spent years behaving like the opposite is true. When Mark told me he could not make it part of me wanted to solve the practical problem immediately. Call the desk. Ask what Patricia needed. Find the cheapest path. Make one more sacrifice and call it temporary. But the whole point of the envelope was that the family had already chosen where authority and benefit should live. So responsibility needed to start there too. If Mark had been trusted to inherit, Mark could be asked to coordinate. If Patricia's plan protected resources for him, then he could use the channels available to him to arrange help. If the family wanted me outside the plan when it came to benefit, then they could not keep pulling me inside the plan whenever it became inconvenient. That was the line, not a punishment, a correction. I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote 3 words at the top. Not my bill. I did not mean I would never help my mother again. I meant I was done being treated as the free version of every solution no one else wanted to pay for Plan 4 or personally carry. There is a difference. It took me too long to learn it. Love can bring soup. Love can make a call. Love can sit beside someone because you choose to be there. But love cannot be the name of a system where one child receives the plan and the other child becomes the unpaid infrastructure underneath it. That was not love. That was convenience with a family nickname. I closed the notebook. My phone buzzed again. I did not pick it up right away. For the first time, I looked across the kitchen at my own family's dinner plates still stacked from the night before and understood where I had been missing from. Not just work, not just trips, home. Once I stopped treating my time like the care fund, I could finally choose the family sitting at my own table. That evening, I cooked dinner. It sounds too small to matter, but it mattered to me. For years, my own home had learned to bend around Patricia's calls. Dinner became something reheated. Plans became tentative. My husband stopped asking whether a trip was serious because every trip became serious once I started packing. My daughter learned to say, "It's okay, Mom," in the careful voice children use when they are trying not to make your guilt heavier. That night I did not leave. I cut vegetables. I set out plates. I listened to the water boil. I answered a normal question about a normal day without one ear, waiting for the next family accusation. That was when I understood how much of my life had been lived on standby. Not gone. Standby. Present enough to function, absent enough that everyone could feel the door was already half open. My husband watched me from the counter and asked, "Are you all right?" I told him the truth. I don't know yet. That was the most honest answer I had given anyone all day. I did not feel free. Not exactly. Freedom is too clean a word for the first evening after a boundary. I felt shaken. I felt guilty. I felt alert, like some part of me still expected the old system to punish me for not obeying. But under all of that, there was something else. Room. A little space around my own thoughts. A little space at the table. A little space where Patricia's emergency did not automatically take the chair beside me. My daughter called while we were eating. I almost did not answer because I was tired of phones. Then I remembered she was not an emergency pulling me away from my life. She was part of the life I kept leaving. So I answered. She told me about a parking problem, a professor who spoke too fast. Nothing dramatic. Nothing anyone else would call important. But I stayed on the phone and heard all of it. That was the first real proof that I had made the right decision. Not that Mark struggled. Not that Patricia had to hear no. That my own child got a mother who was not already halfway to the airport. When I hung up, I did not check the family chat immediately. I washed a pan. I wiped the counter. I put my phone face down and left it there. The house did not feel triumphant. It felt ordinary. And after years of treating ordinary like something I could sacrifice whenever the family needed me, ordinary felt almost sacred. The hardest part was not the noise from my family. It was the silence that came after I stopped feeding the noise. The silence did not feel peaceful at first. It felt like waiting for a door to slam. That is what years of family pressure does to you. Even quiet starts to sound like a threat. I kept expecting my phone to light up again. A longer message from Mark. A sharper one from Aunt Joyce. A soft one from Patricia, the kind that made me feel like I had abandoned a woman instead of stepped out of a role. But for a while, nothing came. The house settled around me. The dishwasher clicked. The hallway light hummed. My phone sat face down on the counter like an animal that had finally stopped pacing. I wanted to pick it up. I wanted to check whether the family was still angry, whether Mark had called the rehab desk, whether Patricia was crying, whether someone had decided I was impossible now. That was the addiction part of responsibility, not the helping. The monitoring, the constant scanning for what might need you next. I had mistaken that scanning for love. It was not love. It was exhaustion dressed as devotion. So I left the phone alone. 10 minutes, then 20, then long enough for the room to stop feeling like a waiting area. At some point, my husband reached over and turned the phone slightly so the screen faced away from me. He did not say anything. He did not need to. That small gesture did what no family argument ever had. It reminded me that I was allowed to be protected too. Not protected from Patricia. Not protected from guilt. Protected from the version of myself that believed every silence was my job to fill. Later that night, I checked the phone once. There were messages. Not many. Enough. Mark had written that he was working on it. Marianne had written that everyone was stressed. Aunt Joyce had written nothing else. Patricia had not texted. That last part hurt more than I expected. I wanted her to tell me she understood. I wanted her to say she had called Mark and realized how uneven the arrangement had been. I wanted a mother in that moment, not another test. But boundaries do not become real because the other person approves them. They become real when you stop withdrawing them to make the room warmer. So I read the messages, put the phone back down, and went to bed without replying. The guilt came with me. So did the relief. They lay there side by side, neither one winning completely. That was honest. I could live with honest. By the next morning, Patricia had to hear the same no without the family chat speaking for her. Patricia called just after lunch. I answered on the second ring. Not because I was eager. Because I wanted to meet the moment instead of retreating from it. Laura, she said, and I could hear right away that she had already been crying. That used to undo me. It still tried. But I knew enough now to separate her pain from my assignment. She said she did not understand why I was being difficult. She said Mark was trying. She said the rehab desk had put her on hold and it had upset her. She said she never meant for me to feel excluded. There it was, not an admission, not exactly, but close enough that I could hear the shape of the truth inside it. I did not interrupt. I let Patricia finish because I wanted this conversation to be one she could not later describe as being cut off. When she finally stopped, I said, "I believe you did not mean to hurt me." That was true. Then I continued, "I also believe you built a system that did hurt me." Silence. Not the family chat kind. The kind that happens when a person hears a sentence they cannot politely move around. Patricia tried to answer, but I kept my voice even and clear. You can be upset that I said no. You can be surprised. You can even be disappointed. But you do not get to act like the surprise is the same thing as the problem. That was the sentence I needed most, because Patricia had spent years teaching me to argue the emotion instead of the structure. If she was sad, I should soften. If she was confused, I should explain. If she was hurt, I should repair. This time, I did not step into any of those roles. I simply stayed in the fact of what had happened. Mark can tell you what he can do, I said. The rehab desk can tell you who they have to call. And I am done being the only person who is expected to absorb the cost of everyone else staying comfortable. That last line made her cry again. I heard it happen. I did not take it back. Not because I wanted to punish her. Because if I took it back, I would have gone right back to translating her distress into my responsibility. She whispered my name. Laura. I let the name sit. Then I answered with the gentlest thing I could say without surrendering the boundary. I love you, Mom. Then, and I am still not the first call anymore. I could hear her breathing on the other end. That was the closest we came to understanding each other in a long time. Not because she agreed, because she finally heard a no that did not arrive with a debate attached. The most unsettling thing about my no was that it did not come with anger for her to fight. The next morning started quietly. Coffee, toast, email. That may sound too small for a story built on family pressure, but small is exactly what I had been missing. My calendar stayed mine. My phone stayed on the table. The PTO block that used to vanish into Patricia's emergencies was still there, untouched, like a piece of my life that had been waiting to be claimed back. I looked at it and felt something I had not felt in a long time. Not victory. Relief. There is a difference. Victory wants an audience. Relief just wants the room to stay quiet long enough for your shoulders to drop. I answered a work call on time. I ate lunch sitting down. I drove home without checking for missed messages every 10 minutes. And when I picked up my daughter after work, I heard myself talking like a person who had not spent the whole day bracing for a family interruption. That mattered more than I expected. She asked if I was coming to her event that weekend. I almost gave her the old answer. Maybe. Depends. Let me see. But I looked at the calendar and said yes. Just like that. One clean yes that belonged to my own household instead of the emergency desk. It was not a giant declaration. It did not heal anything overnight. Patricia was still upset. Mark was still busy. The family group chat was still a place where people could send concern instead of action. None of that disappeared. What disappeared was the belief that I had to let it own my week to prove I cared. That evening I made dinner again. This time I noticed the sound of the knife on the cutting board. I noticed the smell of garlic in the pan. I noticed how much of my life had become invisible to me while I was busy making myself available. That invisibility had always been the cost. The will just made it harder to ignore. When I sat down with my family, nobody thanked me for staying home. They did not need to. My own life had already started to thank me. By the time the dishes were cleared, I had a strange, steady thought. I had not stopped loving Patricia. I had stopped confusing love with being permanently on call. That was the life I got back. Ordinary. Present. Mine. It took me a long time to understand that the hardest part of family pressure is not the loud part. It is the part that teaches you to disappear politely. To explain. To soften. To keep the peace by making yourself smaller until everybody else can stay comfortable. That is what this story was really about for me. Not a dramatic family fight. Not a perfect victory. Not punishment. It was about noticing when love had been turned into a job and then deciding calmly not to keep volunteering for the version that erased me. I still love Patricia. I still think Mark is who the family built him to be. But I no longer confuse being needed with being respected. And I no longer confuse being chosen in an emergency with being valued in a plan. That distinction changed everything. If this story helped you think differently about family pressure and boundaries, subscribe to Tales of Family Revenge for the next story. And tell me in the comments, if you were Laura, would you still go to rehab after being cut out of the will, or would you tell the favored sibling to go first? Because sometimes the real question is not who needs you. It is whether your life can keep belonging to you after everyone gets used to taking from it.